We are going to start with the first question, going to 6. All right, 6, you ready?
Yeah, first, Eric, I want to thank you for the intro. I didn't know how that would look, and appreciate it.
You're welcome. I thought it looked pretty badass.
Yeah, not bad.
Now, 6, before we get into more specific questions targeted directly to Facebook and Oculus, I think it's pretty safe to say that you're not a fan of Facebook at all and what they stand for. But the question would be, what is this ideal outcome that you actually want from this? What could Facebook do for you to hate them less, or even possibly work with them? Or is the idea that as long as Facebook exists, that they really are just the evil part of this equation? What is your end goal with how vocal you are?
It's very simple. Transparency and honesty. Facebook has an obligation to be honest with the developers on a platform that is supposed to support them. If they are building a vertical app store, it is the obligation of the platform holder to build trust. In addition to that, privacy concerns are rampant with Facebook. Facebook is building things such as eye tracking, which is the closest thing in human history to being able to do mind control. There are several studies to do this. So to keep it as simple as possible, they need to build trust with both their users and their developers, and they've done a terrible job of that so far. With my story, several other developers, and even what they did with forcing the Facebook login. They need to build trust if they want to win virtual reality.
Thank you very much. Now I am going to open up the debate floor. I'm going to start with Ryan, though. Do you have any rebuttal or anything you want to go back and forth with?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I agree with 600%. Trust and honesty are critical. And it's interesting because my experience with Facebook is very different. And, you know, they've been very forthcoming. They've shared new features with us. They've shared what they're working on next. The people working at Facebook that we work with are constantly asking for our feedback, even though, you know, we're a team of like 4 people and a relatively small company. And it's been great to see them not only ask for the feedback, but then implement it within, you know, usually months. So it's been pretty positive in that respect. And then the other thing I've actually admired about Facebook is kind of how transparent they are regarding what they're planning to do on the hardware front. I think like at OC6 and a lot of the Oculus Connects, you see Michael Abrash and John Carmack kind of outlining everything that's going on technically, like as is with Carmack usually, and then Abrash talking about, you know, where they see it going. So I think in that respect, you know, Facebook's very different than Apple, who like right now, like who knows if they're working on a VR headset or not. Facebook, in the last conversation with Boz and Carmack, did say that they are working on like the Quest Pro. So I agree with 6, but I do think that Facebook is fairly transparent in certain ways. However, if they're not being transparent with specific developers, then I think that should change.
Can I respond to this?
Oh yeah, floor is open. Floor is open.
Yeah, so I would be very cautious to understand the reason they're being transparent with you. It's for 2 reasons. One is you probably signed a pretty heavy NDA. I could ask you several questions here, which you're not obligated to tell me. And second is you're not building something that they perceive as competitive with either their short-term or long-term goals. And that is an important distinction to make here. I can assume that Facebook is not building their own golf game at any point in the near future. Therefore, you have nothing to worry about. And there are several other developers who've had very dissimilar experiences, who are not provided transparent information. And I'm speaking on behalf of them and myself.
Yeah, I would agree with that. However, I would say that that's probably true of any business in the world. Any business that's going to be competitive with you is going to withhold certain information about the product that's going to compete with you. That's, you know, that's just business, right?
Right, but you're pushing the pillars of transparency as one of the distinctions between Apple, and you're lacking the understanding that this is an exception to the rule for several developers who are creating competitive products. And for my own story, I want to emphasize that Facebook never told me about Oculus Move, and I found out about it the day that Oculus announced it, and Zuckerberg himself told me. In fact, the day before, they were speaking to me about working together. Tell me how that is in any regards transparency.
I wasn't privy to those conversations. So if that's exactly how it went down and they misled you, then I'm certainly not going to stand behind that. However, the transparency I was referring to is mostly like around the hardware and the stuff that Abresh said, and kind of them showing like how they plan to get to the next stage, which is something that, you know, Apple doesn't really do. But yeah, if they're misleading you, then I'm not going to defend that.
I think that one of the things that I have a hard time with is, as I state points, the most common rebuttal is, but Apple does this. I don't give a fuck if Apple does this. If Facebook wants to run virtual reality, they have to be dissimilar than the very company that they bitch about all the time. Zuckerberg comes out and says all the time about how Apple needs to be more open. He says that as he supports a store that does not endorse his own policies, where several of those developers do not experience that. This is the issue that I find, is the blatant dishonesty that Facebook as a platform incurs on its own developers now. And they need to build trust with their users and developers.
Well, let me ask you this. Does YUR run on the Quest?
Does it run on the Quest? I mean,
Yeah,
yes, it runs on the Quest.
Can you run it? So they haven't completely blocked it.
There are several reasons why YUR doesn't function properly. The firmware updates break the application over and over, and we've been in several conversations about having the app in the store. It was the second most used utility, and it was never approved for the store. And this was dissimilar to several of the conversations we've had in emails where they have implied that they are going to work with us, wasting a year of my life.
Why do you want the app in the store?
For distribution reasons. The whole reason that anybody builds anything for the Quest is for distribution, and the fact that they control the majority of the consumer market. That's a fact. That's not some subjective truth. Even Steam VR now is dominated by the Quest. If you want to build in virtual reality, you have to build in the Quest. It's as simple as that.
But you can distribute through SideQuest, right? So from a purely distribution, you can distribute your app. It will run on the Quest. It sounds like it's exposure that you're hoping for.
Distribution is
right?
what an app store supports. And I can put the question back on you. Why are you not just on SideQuest?
Because we want people to download our app and pay for it.
There you go.
Yeah.
You've answered my question for me.
That's essentially using Facebook's advertising. If you think of the store as just basically advertising, you go to the store, you see the apps, you can search for the apps. That's effectively advertising. We're comfortable with that. We understand the impact of that. I mean, let me ask you straight up: if Facebook approved YUR tomorrow, would you guys be on the Quest store? Would
we be on the Quest? So first of all, I no longer work at YUR. But if they would have approved our application, we wouldn't have cared. Even if they would have built Oculus Move, a direct competitor to YUR, I wouldn't have cared. That's not the problem. And going back to your issue about we would be leveraging Facebook's advertising, allowing us into the store does not economically cost them anything unless they were to actively endorse us. We weren't asking for that. We were asking to simply be allowed into the store because the friction of the end user to sideload something is significantly higher than downloading it from the store.